Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you, Sport?
I'm doing fine this morning, and we're going to talk about a problem that is not doing so well, and that is the relationship between the United States and North Korea. It's not an easy matter, but for some reason we have some criticisms to make about exactly how our government is handling the dispute between the two of us. There was news not too long ago, and it's in the news now, about Tillerson having lines of communications with North Korea. I thought, not too bad idea. I'm a little bit surprised that that's happening, and it sort of looked like a benign report. Then all of a sudden we started hearing other things, and it was true. And Tillerson, yes, we try to do this. I don't think he put it into the news that he was doing it. That was probably done secretly. But anyway, it got out, and it probably wasn't fake news. It was probably real news. But that seemed to go along okay until Trump decided to say, "What in thunder are you doing?" He came out with some pretty sharp criticism of Tillerson actually, practicing what he's supposed to do as Secretary of State, talking to somebody.
Yeah, it was amazing. And in the way he did it, he was, I guess, on a golf course, and he tweeted, hey, good job, Tillerson, but you're just wasting your time having diplomacy with Rocket Man. We'll take care of it ourselves, or something like this. And it's we'll do what needs to be done with North Korea. Undercutting his Secretary of State, humiliating him really for doing his job.
He says, save your energy. Don't mess around with this. And the saying goes with the previous administration and this one, nothing's off the table. Yeah. Nothing's off the table. The way I see this is, yes, there is something off the table, and that is common sense and diplomacy. They won't consider that. But when they say that, they're implying that a first strike is on the table, a nuke is on the table. Even though they're not saying it, I don't think that's going to happen, I hope. They're going to have a false flag or an excuse before we just go and start a war. It doesn't happen that way, but they usually build up the animosity or some type of an incident for them to go ahead. So that is where they stand now. But Tillerson's in a bit of a box.
Yeah.
My position on this was if I had been invited to be in administration, which would have never happened. I mean, I wouldn't have wanted any part of this because of just what happens. Because Tillerson's probably a sincere person who wants to try to do the job, even though he's not a libertarian. But I think he's using some common sense on actually willing to talk about that. But how long can this go on where they're fighting like this? What is the evidence so far with the Trump administration? Is this the beginning of the end for Tillerson, or is Tillerson sort of suck it in and say, well, maybe I can do some good in spite of my boss?
You got to wonder, maybe John Bolton is waiting in the wings. Can't wait till Tillerson retires or resigns. But you can imagine how undercut you'd be if your own boss is berating you for doing your job. But here's how weird things have gotten. And I noticed this was linked to an antiwar.com article. The North Koreans are trying to seek out Republican-linked analysts to help explain to them what Trump is all about. They said, we can't figure him out. They get these weird tweets all the time, and they're actually just very confused. They're trying to, and that's dangerous when you're talking about the threat of a nuclear war, when you have a president that is acting in such an unhinged manner that they don't know how to read the cues.
It reminds me of a household incident. We are taught, and you've heard the explanation, that the best way to raise children is for them to know where the parents stand. And the worst thing you can do is have one parent disagreeing with the other parent. I don't know whether that's a good analogy, but in a way, it leads to confusion. It confuses the child, and in this sense, it confuses the people out there that their life is at stake when this goes on. But we have also the issue of sanctions. Sanctions going on, we're always putting them on. And we have also seen that a lot of civilians have died, and children suffer from this. And of course, the incident we talked about the other day was where South Korea actually sent money to North Korea to help the children. But this whole idea, the whole approach, not only this silliness and lack of good reasoning between the Secretary of State and the President, but this obsession with sanctions that it's going to do good. But it really really solidifies the sport. UN gets stronger. And why wouldn't UN behind the scenes at least be wanting to stay close to China? And the people who might like to get rid of UN, the people in North Korea, it would be more difficult. So the sanctions backfire, and this sort of thing of having somebody recognize that maybe a little bit of conversation can't hurt anything, and then get ridiculed. This is really ridicule. I mean, he's talking down to him, and I don't know what's going to happen on this, but I don't know whether the handwriting's on the wall or not, and I don't think. Maybe Trump doesn't even know today. Maybe tomorrow. Sometimes he does that. He expressed disapproval, and then he roots around, and all of a sudden, the guy resigned. This sort of thing.
Yeah, it happened with Price. The idea the neocons want to put forth, and they do it over and over, is that this regime is run by a madman. We cannot make a deal with this guy because he's a madman. They said it about Saddam. They said it about Gaddafi. They're saying it about Kim Jong-un. But, we talked about this before we did the show a few times. If you look back at the 1994 framework agreement between the U.S. and North Korea, it was a deal that was made under President Clinton, to his credit, that the North Koreans were actually abiding by. And there's a great article that I was just looking at, and here are a few of the terms. By 2000, this is 1994, they made the agreement. By 2003, the U.S. would build 2 light water reactors to take the place of the nuclear reactors they had. They would send them 500,000 tons of fuel in the meantime until those reactors were up and running. The U.S. would lift sanctions, remove North Korea from the terrorist list, and normalize relations, i.e. end the war. And then both sides would provide formal assurances against the threat of nuclear attack. Well, by 1998, the framework agreement, they looked at it and said they're abiding by every one of the terms. But it was the U.S. side that broke every term. They never built the reactors. The fuel shipments were delayed. They didn't remove them from the terror list until 2008. The sanctions were not eased until the year 2000. No action to end the Korean War. And in 2002, there was a threatened nuclear strike on North Korea. So that's when they said, we've had enough, and they pulled out of the deal. So really, you can make a deal with him, and they did make a deal with him.
That was during the period when, of course, George W. Bush was in office, and the neocons had a much louder voice, and they shifted that policy because they didn't like what Clinton had been doing. So this is the problem, but that's, sort of brings up the subject of how well are we doing with our agreement with Iran. The world seems to be satisfied, and a lot of our people are satisfied. In our own government, a lot of our military people are satisfied. Dunsford, the Joint Chiefs of Staff chairman, he's okay with this, and he says they're all in compliance. Even Tillerson, he says a few words that sort of supports Trump. Well, maybe they should change some things, but he says they're in compliance. And IAEA, the United Nations inspectors, say they're in compliance. Yeah, Trump says they're not in compliance. We're going to break this off. So we have 2 generals now. The general in the Air Force, along with Dunford, they're both disagreeing with the president in public. One time MacArthur did that, and a similar thing, and he was gone in a day. But generals, most of the time, do not, essentially never downplay the president, because he's the commander-in-chief, and it's a military position he holds for the military. But now there's 2 of them doing this. So if somebody is buried someplace in there, which I'm not saying that it is, and they're trying to cause chaos in the administration and confusion, somebody is doing a pretty good job. I can't believe it's deliberate, but who knows?
Maybe it's
but
Putin.
Anyway, something's going on there with chaos is coming out of the administration, and nobody knows what the foreign policy is all about and what tomorrow will bring. One thing is, I watch the markets very closely, and in the first 6 months or so, every time Trump said something pretty ridiculous, the markets responded. But right now, the markets are sort of benign to it.
Ignore him.
I don't know whether they'd respond to anything except buy more stocks and buy military stocks talks, because when he says things that, this doesn't make any sense, that it's sort of benign, and I don't know whether that's a little bit more complacency, because he is the president, he does have a lot of authority, and he can fire these guys when they get out of line. But it is a mess, and this thing looks like they're determined to go. Well, the neocons are determined. Now, I don't know how long the neocons are going to put up with these people who are saying, that we're in compliance. That must annoy some of the neocons when they hear those stories.
And, Dunford, he was speaking before the U.S. House when he said this, excuse me, and he made a very good point. He said, because they are in compliance with the agreement, Iran is in compliance. If we pull out of the deal unilaterally and say they're not when they are, it's going to make the U.S. look bad, and it's going to make it very difficult for us to make deals with any other nation, probably thinking about North Korea and a number of other places. So he makes a good point, really. Our credibility is on the line. Washington's credibility is on the line as an international actor.
They have something in the White House called the National Security Cabinet, a group of people that get together, the generals and other diplomats get together, and they're entirely in agreement with the assumption that Iran's in compliance. And what would happen if we get out, I think it'd be, from the viewpoint of the establishment, that would be very bad for the United States. So that's when I ask, whether some of this could be done deliberately or looking for chaos. I don't think that's the case. I think there's people in the administration, including our president, are misled about what's best for us. It's hard for me to believe that he wants to undermine what's good for America. He wants us to be great again, and of course we all want America to be great, but we have different definitions. Some of us think that being great is being an example for protection of liberty and free markets, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen on this deal.
Well, it's sort of hopeless in Washington, but you have a president like George W. Bush, you have a president like Trump, and I would say even to a degree Obama, but there are slight differences. They get into town with very little foreign policy experience, very little understanding, not big readers, neither the two of them, and they get there and then they hear the neocons singing the siren songs. We'll help you, we'll make you great, here's what you've got to do, and I think he likes the sound of his own voice, we know that, but he likes the way he's pampered by the neocons, and I think he's listening to them increasingly.
Yeah, and the neocons and the media just brings up the subject of the deep state. Where are they, and what can they do, and how much power do they have, and how can they shift position? Because in a way, we've complained that some of the positions that Trump held in the campaign and in the early months, it was sort of thinking that he's going in the right direction, in that he was defying the deep state, but all of a sudden it gets shifted to the position that goes along more with the neocons. There was one program we have, neocons have won, on some of these disputes, and that of course is not good for us. And right now there's not a precise foreign policy that we can decipher from what's going on.
And look at someone like Nikki Haley, who we talk about a lot. Here she is at the UN. She's literally a bomb thrower. She's even worse than Samantha Power. And she, over the weekend, said something like Assad needs to go. She's going back to 2011. So he's got these people surrounding him. He thinks they're great people doing a great job, but they're really undercutting our reputation and our safety.
Well, there's no doubt about that. Would you like to sort of summarize this dilemma that we have, and what are we going to do about it other than keep running our program here and trying to explain things to ourselves and everybody else?
Well, I think it was great that Tillerson said we have direct connections with North Korea. He was asked, well, is it through China? And they said, no, we have some direct ties. And I think that is encouraging. Hopefully Trump, when he's on the golf course, sticks to golf.
That would be a better idea. No, I think this is the case that what we need to do is talk to people. Why shouldn't there be nothing taken off the table? And like I said before, the only thing they take off the table is common sense and diplomacy. And you're not even allowed to consider that, but you're allowed to consider nuclear first strikes. Nothing off the table except diplomacy. And yeah, here we have here we're seeing some dissension within the ranks, within the administration, in spite that everybody's handpicked by Trump. Maybe Trump, because he sort of is attracted to the military personnel and the generals. Maybe he thought generals would be easier to handle and they would always be for just war, and generally they are more militant than others, but he probably thought they would always go along with that and they would never suggest that we should have diplomacy. So I think the case here is, yes, 3 cheers for Tillerson. I hope he keeps doing this. I hope he doesn't leave, even though he isn't a non-interventionist like ourselves. He certainly would, if he has influence, tone down what Trump is saying, but it remains to be seen. Who knows? Within a week he may be gone. I hope not. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.